period we're moving into, where geographically we're moving into this close proximity to the central sun. This time period is it is a time of change when the stepped up radiations from the central sun then start affecting everything on the planet, including the planet itself. So it's a time where things speed up. It's a time of turmoil because as things speed up, it goes a little too fast for society and for certain people, so we have a lot of problems. The predictions of past from biblical times, which are still coming true, we have to be very careful about. They're happening. And he cautions us that as a race, as a planet, we're really doing nothing about the major problems on our planet. He says since 1974, the total atomic destruction of the Earth has been averted by some very powerful beings, extraterrestrials. That, of course, was some of the work of Ascot and his younger contacts. That danger is past. That was existing then, but the danger of a third world war has not been removed at all. It's still going to happen pretty much just exactly the way that it's predicted and has been predicted for a couple of thousand years, because the people are are doing nothing to change it. Billy says, look to the beginning of the Third World War to come during a time when we think things are very peaceful. Suddenly, without any warning at all, in the middle of the night, the cry of war is going to break out in the middle of the night, and it's going to be a great surprise to everybody here. So we want to look, perhaps right now there's hardly any peace anywhere on the planet. There's wars everywhere you look. Okay, let's move into some of the more definite prophecies, and let me start a little bit with some of the prophecies from the Talmud of Manuel, which is the original teachings and thoughts of Manuel, who was wrongly called Jesus Christ. One of the important things in there that we all have heard is the prediction that he said that he would return. Some people believe he's returning in 2,000 years. Well, that isn't exactly what was in there. He just says that it will come to pass in 2,000 years when mankind has become capable of better thought, that his teachings will be revealed again unfalsified. And that's exactly what happened in 1963 when his original writings were dug up. Actually, the writings were written by Judas Iscariot. They were dug up. They've been translated, and they are now out in a little book called the Talmud of Manuel. He mentions also in those writings that there will be a new prophet in our time, or what he calls the distant future then, that will not possess as much power over evil or disease as he does, but the new prophet of our time will have the knowledge which is the same as his, will have the knowledge and understanding of creation, and will be able to, as he put it, shake the foundations of earth with the revelations of the truth that's brought forth. He goes on also to mention, which is kind of interesting here, that the time when his his teachings will be revealed, he says, will be a time when a war is threatened from space, and many new gods will seek dominion over the earth. Again, as we mentioned earlier, that Emmanuel was aware that gods are humans, and they are humans, great wisdom kings on the highest realms of physical evolution, who exert great force and knowledge over other people. So here he's talking about that there will be a time, and apparently it's very much time about right now, where there will be a war threatened from space. He also goes on to talk about the prophet of the current time of our time will lead a very difficult life, will be persecuted greatly. There's also some prophetic statements in the Talmud of Manuel at the time when Emmanuel is at the Mount of Olives talking to his followers, and they're asking them about these signs that he's talking about, when they're going to happen. And he says, take care and beware that in the future time, that he's in 2,000 years that he's talking about, that he says many people will come and try to take credit for him, claiming that they are Emmanuel. They will try to deceive people. There will be a lot of rumors of war, but people shouldn't really be too afraid, because this really isn't the end. It's not the end of a world. But it is a time when people are going to rise up against each other. One kingdom will rise up against another one. There's going to be great earthquakes and great water, he says, back and forth. This is all the beginning of the tribulations, he says. Man will be delivered in affliction. There'll be massive amounts of death. There are going to be cults rise up against each other. Large amounts of blood will flow. Many people are going to die in these battles between these groups. Hate is on the rise. But he says anybody who really believes in the truth, people that really find the truth within creation, will be able to survive all of this. He says there's a comment in here also. It says, when the people see the horror of the devastation of Jerusalem, of which has been spoken by prophets, then the end will come. So apparently, through all this destruction of the war and everything that's apparently going to be starting soon, at some point towards the end of it, then we'll see all the destruction and devastation of the places in and around Jerusalem, and that will be close to the end. The next warning from Emmanuel is for the Jewish nation during this time of great war. And he's cautioning the people, the Jewish people, to hide, to flee to the mountains, especially to women who are pregnant, to run for their lives, really, because of the mass destruction that's going to hit in their country. He says there will be a great affliction as never before seen since the beginning of the world. It's going to be some of the worst death and large amounts of death to ever happen on our planet. He also mentions, which is kind of interesting, the metal machines will be built for the air, the sea, and the land. The land is going to rot. He talks about heavy projectiles, metal projectiles that burn the world, and nothing will be spared. It says the foundations of life will be laid in the projectiles so they can kindle the deadly fire with it. Then he talks about if at that time, when we're launching all of these projectiles in the war, if the sons of heaven do not interfere, he says that almost no one will survive. He says this will come at a time when the population will be 10 times 500 million people, where 2 parts of them will be exterminated and killed. So he's talking, it actually mentions there about 2/3 of the people, the population of the planet, will die during this terrible time of war. He cautions us that during this time of war, he says, there's going to be many false prophets. There will be, many people claiming to be him, to be an Emmanuel. He says we will hear statements where people will be saying that he's in the desert. Everybody go out and see Emmanuel there. Or he's over here at the ocean, or he's in the chambers. He says, don't believe that. He says there's just going to be a lot of lying, because he says he does return, that physically he will return, but he will make himself known. Because he says his coming will be with the host of the sons of heaven, by whom I have my life again at that time. So he's talking about that again, just as it says in the Talmud Emmanuel, that his life will once again be procreated and caused to be at this time by benefit of the sons of heaven, the heavenly fathers, and they will help him one more time to make his life known. Another collection of prophecies that's also mentioned in the book were the prophetic things that were explained to him by Ascot, and that came back in 1956. Apparently among Ascot's responsibilities and duties during her mission was to prevent a terrible universe catastrophe. It says in the notes that they were very concerned that the events on Earth may actually cause some destruction of the universe itself. Now it seems pretty amazing that us little Earthmen could actually do anything that would disturb the universe, and especially back in the 60s. And they were very concerned up through the year 1974 that some doomsday device that the certain people were playing with could actually destroy part of the universe. I never took that too seriously until just recently. I found out that currently now, here in 1992, that certain scientists are actually discovering that our giant sun and some of our large gas ball planets may actually, instead of being nuclear reaction type things like we've always thought, are not at all, but in fact seem to be drawing energy from other dimensions. That at the top of these great sources of power, like our sun, on the very top pole and on the bottom pole, there is sort of a hexagon area at the top that seems to be receiving energy, and they have mathematically calculated the probability this may be true, that our sun may indeed be connected to other universes or other dimensions as we think of it through the surface area on the top and the bottom of the sun, which means that our sun itself isn't really a nuclear explosion, that somehow it's being heated up actually by dimensional energy. A comment along that line was even from the Pleiadians that the sun itself is not quite what we think it is, that even though the surface temperature is quite hot, that we will be surprised to find out once our technology advances that it's actually cooler on the inside, that it's not the great explosion in the middle that we think it is. So possibly the sun somehow do receive energy from other dimensions, and that could be perhaps what the ETs were worried about in the 60s, that if we were to set off some of these devices which could upset actually the solar system, some sort of energy or effect could be set off affecting other dimensions, which could unleash untold problems that may in effect actually destroy part of the universe as they were so worried about. Well, apparently Ascot in those years took whatever steps she felt was necessary and did intervene in mankind to prevent those certain events from happening. So good for her. There was warnings always from Ascot during those times too, where she talked about future events back in the 56 that which actually pertain to now, because she was talking about America, Russia, and China are pushing for like world domination. They're kind of fighting it out. Well, Russia, of course, is broke up, and that's changed a little bit, and China hasn't really played their hand yet. But she says at this particular time we ought to be very careful of the Jewish Zionists, who are plotting a lot of murderous deeds and violence and terrorism, and actually are working in conjunction with certain Christian religions to take over certain areas of the world. So apparently, in the face of the might of America and Russia and other countries, in China, certain elements of the Jewish people, the Jewish Zionists, and certain Christian groups are plotting actually how they could take over certain parts of the planet themselves. It's mentioned in here that the people of Earth should take care not to help Israel, for every small assistance is refunctioned by them into a deadly weapon back at us. So historically, it's talking about that they're suggesting that it's going to be a natural event for the destruction of Israel, and it is for the betterment of mankind. Not that death is good, it's just that we are not aware really of what a terrible part that Israel will actually play in the mass destruction and loss of life on the planet Earth. There was a whole series of prophecies given to Billy then in 1956, which are now quite a few years old, and I'll just dash over them for you. I had gone over them a little bit in the contact notes themselves, but since we have a tape here just on prophecies, I'll reiterate some of these events because it's important also to note that these events have all come to pass, and with terrible accuracy. I say terrible because we're going to read off a list of deaths here and so forth, and all these events came to pass exactly as Ascot said they would, which only confirms again their very incredible technology and their abilities. She says the unavoidable events of the future, and here she's talking in 1956, she says these events will happen with absolute exactness and accuracy, just as she's about to explain them to Billy. And I'll just run over them because I have gone over them one more time. She first talked about the murder of Joseph Stalin, which would be on March 5th, 1953, and that was done by the party itself. It says here that Stalin was showing too much friendliness towards the Jewish Zionist terrorists, and so for that reason he was poisoned. It mentions in there also his successor Nikita Khrushchev will be forced out of office in '64, and that was to give the rationalized Zionist hostilities its last form, was the expression. So it says during that time period in America, Fitzgerald Kennedy will be elected to office, but he will be murdered in '63, it says, by the secret order of the American Security Organization, the CIA. The day of his death will be November 22nd, 1962 in Dallas, Texas. It says there will be a second political assassination following just 5 years after that. Through the order of the same organization, a presidential candidate will be killed. His death will be on June 6, 1968 in Los Angeles. His name will be Robert Kennedy, a brother of the president. It says the Holy Office in Rome will also be pulled in the worldwide political and religious intrigue. Just the same as with Stalin, a poison will be used to kill Pope John XIII, who will only serve for a very short time. His successor, Pope Paul VI,